Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on an all-new episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. I'm taking my weekly look at everything going on in the world of combat sports. Once again, it may be a holiday weekend, but I am not taking off of the show. I'm coming back at you with some recaps of what we saw last weekend in combat sports. Unfortunately, did not get those previews as part of last week's episode. We had some things going wrong in the homestead here, some repairs that delayed taping, then some technical issues that delayed editing, so we didn't get it out to you in time to get all the picks in that we had locked in there for the UFC Fight Night out in Qatar. We're going to recap everything that went on in that. We're going to recap the Ring 4 Night of Champions boxing pay-per-view out there on DAZN in the Middle East as well. We will also talk about some new PFL news, some updates to the card for February 7th to start their 2026 schedule. All that on today's show on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Make sure you continue to follow the show on social medias at Fighting Lines on X, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok at Fighting Lines Pod. And however you're listening to us, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe, like the show, comment, give us some love out there so that other people can find the show as well. We appreciate everything you do. Appreciate you being part of it. I'm going to get right into it and recap what we saw last weekend out there in Qatar at UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan versus Hooker. All right, we had a great loaded card for a UFC Fight Night. The first time we can say that in a while. We had so many duds out there in the Apex, but they took this one on the road out to Qatar to the Middle East for UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan versus Hooker. It was a great afternoon delight for us there, where you got the nice little start at 1 o'clock Eastern for the main card, 4 o'clock Eastern. You're done for the day, moving on, getting into your Saturday night festivities. I love that. It was on ESPN Plus, one of the last cards we'll see on ESPN. Especially ESPN Plus, but it was headlined by a very important fight at lightweight. As we said, unfortunately, all these fights we did not get out there in the preview for the episode. We had it all taped, but due to some tech issues with editing, it took us a little longer to get it out than we wanted, so we just cut out all the previews because fights were already done by that. But if you follow us on social media, we made sure to get the picks out there, and some of those were big for you. Biggest one we unfortunately missed the timing on in that prelim. That would have been a handsome payout, but we still made some great picks for you. And we got them out to you on X and on Instagram. So make sure you're always following and looking out for those, because sometimes if I have the time, I'll just get it all there in a message so that you are able to just bite-size, see where we're going with these fights and with these odds instead of having to watch the whole episode, although I appreciate when you do. But still, we had this fight card headlined by a lightweight battle, number 1, Arman Tsarukyan versus number 6, Dan Hooker in the lightweight division. Now, of course, as we said, Tsarukyan, the 29-year-old, was 9-2 in the UFC, had won 4 fights in a row. He's coming off that split decision win over Charles Oliveira at UFC 300, where he got into it with a fan, but we hadn't seen him in a while. You know, we've been through 22 numbered events plus all these fight nights, and we hadn't seen Tsarukyan because he was supposed to get a title shot, then got injured, and had been out for a while, so we were waiting to see his return. I mean, been under the, thumb of the UFC. They were pissed off about that, and they'd replace that last minute, so probably held him off for a while, but now he was back against Dan Hooker, the New Zealand striker, who was 14-8 in his career in the UFC, winning 3 in a row before that, coming off a split decision win over Gamrot last August. What was going to go on this fight? We said both guys were well-rounded. Both guys can win any which way. We like Tsarukyan. Obviously, he was a big favorite at minus 650, so nothing to really bet there. Even in a parlay, it wasn't going to bring you much help. It was going to drag things down. So I said that both guys had fought to decisions lately in the last few fights. But it being a 5-round fight, I wasn't going to think it was going to go the distance. Now, I thought it would go a little bit deeper into the fight because Tsarukyan was returning from being off for a while, had some grappling matches, still not the same. So I thought maybe it'd take him a little while to get his footing. I had Tsarukyan in round 4 or 5 or by decision at plus 120. Didn't get that far. Had no chance. Knew in the first round this was probably going to be a bet that was going to take a lot to get to, and we didn't get it as Tsarukyan gets the second round arm triangle at 3 minutes and 34 seconds into the round. Really, he had Hooker in danger the first round, too. Now, Hooker had his chances, but Tsarukyan looked great from the start. He looked in shape. He looked like he was feeling comfortable on the feet, landing some good shots early on Hooker. Hooker tries to go from taking the back, standing, to get a standing guillotine in the first round, but Arman flips it around on him, ends up on top control the rest of the first round, just beating him up, controlling him, getting the different positions, but never really advancing too much, but still beating up Hooker and showing that he was the better, stronger fighter. Then we get to the second round. Hooker tries to grab a guillotine again as Arman's going for the takedown early on. With just 1 minute into the round, though, Arman pulls off a crazy 360-degree spin on him to get out of a guillotine choke. Not exactly something you've ever seen most people do. You know, he's even talked about in interviews afterwards where he's like, the first one I attacked the right way, the way you're supposed to. He just knew, I'm flexible, I'm fast, and my neck could take a lot. I'm just going to try a different way here. Just spun on him. Ended up on top in guard. And then 3 minutes in, he eventually transitions to the mount against Hooker, gets on top of him and throws on the arm triangle right away. And Hooker fought valiantly to get rid of it. He tried to get it out of it, tried to release the pressure, tried to survive, but there was just too much time left in the round. And Tsarukyan is able to hold on, able to wait till he gets to a tighter position and just finish it off where Hooker eventually has to tap. And now he cements himself as the top contender in this lightweight division once again. And now some people are still throwing out Paddy Pimblett, that he should fight Ilia Topuria for the belt, for the lightweight title. No way can you make that happen after this fight. Before this fight, there was a lot of talk about that. We didn't know what Tsarukyan was going to be like coming back from that injury. That's a very serious injury. Having a back issue flare up like that in sports, not just in fighting, but in sports in general. So, yeah, maybe you could say, hey, who knows if this guy's going to be up to that challenge, and you give it to Pimblett, who's been around. But now that you've seen Tsarukyan fight the way he did coming back, not that Hooker is in his prime or one of the top contenders right now, even though he's number 6, you have to give it to Tsarukyan. There's no way Paddy Pimblett at number 5 jumps Tsarukyan after that performance at Qatar. And if he does, then what the hell do we even have the rankings for? Another pisses this guy for pulling out the day before the title fight, but you left him at number 1. He put on a dominating performance coming back. There's no way you can jump Paddy Pimblett over him now and make him as the first guy up to face Ilia Topuria for that lightweight title here. Now, Topuria has talked about it since, saying he wants to actually chase Makhachev up to 170. Of course, they got that bad blood. They're supposed to fight at 155. It never materialized. So he wants Makhachev. He's willing to chase him up to 170 and try to be a 3-division champ. But he says he's not sure the UFC wants him to do that. They want him to defend that title. And that makes sense. You don't want to just win a belt, give it up, win a belt, give it up. Try to chase this guy. He even brought up the idea of making a catch weight, pound-for-pound best fight, which, come on, let's not make him another fake belt. We already have the BMF. Let's not do another ridiculous thing where it's pound-for-pound king belts just so we can make fights happen but not give up belts. That would just be a pain in the ass, ridiculous, and hold up divisions. So if you want to move up to 170, if the UFC is okay with it, I guess go for it, although I hate it. Stay at 155. You're going to be too small at 170. Makhachev looked great at that weight class. I don't know if Topuria can do the same thing to jump from 145 to 155 to 170. But either way, he says if they won't let him do that, he wants Paddy Pimblett. I mean, come on, really? You just saw what this guy did. Don't tell me he's not the top contender, not the one that should get that shot. Maybe you have the bad blood with Paddy. Maybe you think it would be better for a promotion. But if we're doing it over how we rank these fighters, which is the whole point of having rankings, otherwise you just throw names in the hat and just pick what matchup works out great. If you have rankings, this guy's number 1, just dominated a guy in the top 10. There's no way you can't put him as the first one up to contend right now for that lightweight title. You also had a great battle at welterweight that was going to be part of this whole mini tournament we had going on this month for who gets that shot at Makhachev after he gets that belt. Well, it was number 2, Belal Muhammad, the former champion, against number 6, Ian Machado Garry. Muhammad, the 37-year-old from Chicago, 15-4-1 in the UFC, going against Garry, the 28-year-old from Ireland, who's 9-1 in the UFC. Now, the first loss for Machado Garry was, of course, to Rakhmonov, losing that first fight to him, but then rebounded against Praches for a win last April, unanimous decision. So getting himself back up into that top ranking class here with the welterweight division. Now is going to be, can he propel himself back up into that top 5 and maybe even top spot of contending against Makhachev? We thought it was going to go deep. I liked Machado Garry. He was minus 290, but obviously some not great odds. Decent if you want to put in a parlay, but I thought that he was being set up to climb up here in these rankings, to climb up into title contention with Muhammad being older, maybe slowing down a step. And both these guys went deep in the last couple fights, so I had Machado Garry by points at minus 110. Much better bet, much nicer odds, and that's the way he wins it. He gets the unanimous decision win, 30-27 on 2 judge scorecards, 29-28 on 1. Now, I'm not going to say it was the most exciting fight. Machado Garry did what he had to do. He picked him apart from the outside. He stuffed all Muhammad's takedowns. He did a good job. But he's also a guy who, when this fight came to be, said that he had to have a knockout type performance to get this next title shot. So by his own standards, did not do that. He did a great job on the feet. He definitely beat him on the feet. He bloodied him right away. He stuffed all the takedowns, but he was also on the bicycle a little bit, on the back foot, avoiding the takedowns by backing up a lot. So he did good with the striking, but it never seemed like he was really dominating, never seemed like he was full on the aggressor. He was doing a lot of countering, a lot of reacting, which is fine. That's a good way to win a fight. Not a great way to be the #1 contender for that championship, though. You showed you could stuff a takedown against Bilal Muhammad. Doesn't mean you can stuff it against Makhachev, even though he said so in the post-fight that he says, I stopped this guy so I can stop Makhachev. Different beast right now, of course. Now, if you look at the rankings, if you look at where things stack up, the latest rankings changed now after this fight. Now they kind of put him as #2 in the division. I don't know if I agree with that. I'll tell why in a second. First of all, he's right behind JDM. JDM just lost the title, so obviously he's not getting the shot because he just lost it in dominating fashion. So he's not going to then get a chance to rebound right away. He's going to have to fight a guy or two to get back in that title picture. So then, #2 by rankings, like I just said with Tsarukyan, yeah, then IMG should be the top contender. He holds a win over Proches. So despite Proches' great win at MSG, you're not going to jump him over IMG for that title fight. But here's my issues with some other names that I put ahead of him. Now, Morales is a guy I put up there, maybe even over IMG, because while if you're just looking at straight rankings and the way they did that, it doesn't work out. But Morales is undefeated. Morales is more exciting, getting knockouts, dropping people, has a great personality. So he could be a guy you get in that mix, a guy who should get that shot depending on timing, depending on what the UFC wants to do. Could absolutely jump in there. Although technically, if you're going by the rankings, he can't because of the way they set it up. The wrench in the gears for me, Rakhmonov. Now they changed the rankings so that now IMG is above him. He's #3 in the rankings. IMG is #2. Rakhmonov was up there forever in this division. Now the knock against him is that he's been inactive. Had that knee injury. Had to get double surgery. He's been in a long recovery. He said that he was injured before he got that Machado Garry fight. Still beat him. And that now he's healed. He is getting back to in shape, getting back to being in fighting shape in the top contender position that he wants to be in, showing that he is at his full strength and will be ready at the end of February, beginning of March. Well, if he's going to be ready, then how do you not put an undefeated fighter who beat the guy that is somehow in front of him as the top contender? You can't just jump IMG over a guy who beat him. Doesn't matter how long ago it was. Doesn't matter that he hasn't fought since. He beat him. He's technically better than him. That's just the eye test right there. Don't tell me that the guy who lost is somehow better than the one he beat just because he's won 2 fights while the other guy's been out. That's good that he's been active. He's won good fights. He's been impressive in winning those fights, but he still lost to Rakhmonov. So you can't jump him. You can't do that. And don't even give me Kamaru Usman that we're throwing out there. Makhachev's been talking about him. They're managed by the same guy. I know he was a former champion. Some people put him up there as one of the best ever in that division, but that is absolutely insane to think that he is the first one that Makhachev should defend his belt against. I put Rakhmonov, IMG, Morales, Proches all before him, and probably in that order. Rakhmonov, IMG, Morales, Proches. Now you could have Morales and Proches fight and bolster one of their resumes even more. But like I said last week, I don't love that because then you're taking one of them out for a year or two from this title picture. You could have them fight other guys and possibly rise up, or you can make Morales fight IMG to possibly get that title contention if you give Rakhmonov the title fight. There's a lot of different things they could do. There's a lot of guys in the mix. But right now, the talk of putting Ian Machado Garry over a guy who beat him just because you somehow changed the rankings so that he's better than him, I'm not buying it. Even though the guy was out for a year, plenty of guys have come back from injury to fight for a title after being out for a while. Give that guy the chance here. You also had a light heavyweight battle between #9 Volkan Oezdemir versus #14 Alonzo Menefield. Oezdemir, the 36-year-old Swiss, was coming off a decision loss to Olberg last November, so working his way back here, hadn't been active for a while. Going against Menefield, the 38-year-old American who's coming about back-to-back wins, both by decision. I thought that Oezdemir would win this fight. It was going to be all about who controlled it. If it goes distance, goes to decision, Menefield had a chance. If we're getting a finish, it's going to be Oezdemir. He was minus 235 on the money line. I like that. I liked him even better by KO TKO at plus 140, and that hits. That was a nice hit for sure. And it was never really in doubt. He gets a first round KO TKO a minute 27 seconds in. I mean, right away, Uzumir was chasing Benavidez around the cage, and Benavidez was backing up, being more defensive, not trying to fight off his opponent and keep him away from him. He was just backing up and trying to react. And just over 1 minute in, Uzumir throws a standing knee with an uppercut that came before that shakes Benavidez, and then just starts unloading on him before he drops him and jumps right in to finish it. It's a nice bounce back win for him, an impressive win. He says after the fight that he wants to work his way back up to the top 5 and eventually into the title picture. It's a little late in his career. We'll see if he can get that. I mean, he has won 3 of his last 4, but can he beat some of these top guys in that division right now? An Olberg, a Prochazka, a Roundtree? I don't know. We'll see, but it might be a tough task at his age, but still showing that he has the power to finish guys even at this point. You also had a welterweight battle between Jack Hermansson and Orolbai. Hermansson had been up and down recently. Orolbai had won 3 of his last 4 fights in the UFC. I wasn't sure who was going to win this one because I thought it could have been, a slip-up spot for Orolbai against Hermansson possibly. It wasn't. He gets the first round KO TKO 2 minutes and 46 seconds into the fight. Hermansson looked bigger. He looked taller, but was still getting walked down by his opponent and was circling while Orolbai hunted him. Both guys were landing some shots. Then about halfway through the round, Orolbai lands a straight right that just rocked Hermansson. You could tell that he was shook, but still, he didn't jump on him. Still didn't try to just beat down Hermansson. Was still cautiously stalking him, hunting him, smelling blood, but not just selling out and trying to get himself caught. And then 15 seconds later, throws another right, lands right by the ear of Hermansson, puts him out. Ref jumps in right away, fight over. Nice win there. Heavyweight, we had Waldo Cortes Acosta versus Shamil Graziev. Now, Cortes Acosta was coming in here on short notice. Got the fight on Wednesday, flying back from the Dominican Republic after just fighting a couple weeks ago, at the beginning of November, where he had the eye injury against D'Elia. He came back to win that one by first round KO, but still said after the fight his eye was messed up, couldn't see great. Apparently healed up enough for this fight because he flew on just a couple days' notice. Wednesday took off. Almost doesn't make it with his team because they had some problems in New York where his coach decides, I'm going to go find some eye patches to, be funny about this. Going to find a pharmacy somewhere in the airport, went outside the gate area, outside security to go find a pharmacy, finds them, then almost doesn't make the connecting flight in New York because of having to go back through security to get there. Then he gets contained in Qatar because tried to meet up with the fighter, went to the wrong door, and obviously there was a language barrier there, ends up getting interrogated there for a while, just made it back to his fighter in time for the fight there, and Cortes Acosta almost had to go without a corner, but gets there just before weigh-ins, weighs in fine because it's heavyweight, and then goes and does his thing and gets a first-round KO TKO over Graziev with 1 minute and 22 seconds into the fight. Graziev was coming forward early, pushing Cortes Acosta to the cage, looking to try to take him out, but Waldo was cool. He was sitting back, waiting. 1 minute in, right after Graziev lands a good right, Cortes Acosta lands a big right that drops Graziev. He starts landing some shots on him, but then kind of lets him back up, it seems like. Then stalking him, turning the tables instead of backing up. Now he's the hunter, going after the hunted. Lands another huge right that drops Graziev. A little bit later, the ref jumps in, fight over. A great win for him. Another impressive performance here in the first round. That was his 5th fight this year. 4-1 in 2025 for Waldo Cortes Acosta. And you know what? He doesn't think he's done. He said he wants to win right back in there. He wants on that December 13th card for the UFC, the final card on ESPN, the fight night at the Apex. Doesn't want to jump in too quickly, not going for December 6th here, but once in there. And the craziest thing is that the UFC is even trying to make it happen. They're trying to get this guy a 6th fight in the calendar year here. Got him to number 5 in the rankings right now in the heavyweight division. I mean, honestly, outside of the rematch between Aspinall and Gane, you can make a good case for this guy being next in line for a title shot with another win. If he fights one of those top 5 guys and gets a win, how do you not put Waldo Cortes Acosta in the mix as a title contender? The guy has been shown how game he is to fight on the regular. I mean, if he gets 6 fights in 1 year, that's just insane and unheard of. Of course, we're having Dvalishvili go 5 this year. Cortes Acosta already has 5, might get 6, might outdo him. So we'll see if he's able to do that and put himself into that title mix here at heavyweight. Definitely an exciting fighter, definitely a fun guy to watch, and getting a lot of fans there, Salsa Boy. Flyweight battle between number 11, Tagir Ulanbekov versus Kyoji Horiguchi. I was excited for this one because Horiguchi, the 35-year-old, is making his return to the UFC after 9 years away. Had fought in Rizin and Bellator, left on a high note from the UFC, but decided he wanted to go to Rizin, try to do bigger things there, and get some more cards based around him than kind of just being part of the cards that he was on, because the flyweight division wasn't getting a lot of love at that point. But this was a guy who only lost to the UFC Demetrius Johnson. Otherwise, he was one of the best in this division. Going against Ulanbekov, the 34-year-old Dagestani who had come in on a 4-fight win streak. Now, I thought that Horiguchi was going to get the win. I picked him at plus 172. It wasn't like he was coming in against some young phenom that, was going to outpoint him, that was going to be too quick. I thought he was going to have a good showing here, and he did. He gets the win by third-round submission, rear naked choke, 2 minutes and 18 seconds into the round. Now, the first round, Ulanbekov was doing well against him. He was taking him down to the mat a little bit, but Horiguchi was getting back up to the feet, was doing some good striking, didn't let himself get shaken or frustrated by the takedowns. Veteran, long-time fighter, knew what to do there. Second round, all of a sudden, he starts stalking. He starts coming forward and landing some nasty leg kicks. One of them puts Ulanbekov to the mat. He jumps on him and controls him the rest of that fight. Those leg kicks, you could tell, were stacking up on Ulanbekov. In the second round, he was hurting. And then the third round, another nasty leg kick gets him hurt. You can see he's hobbled. Eventually, gets taken down to the mat again, gets beaten up again by Horiguchi. He eventually gets it back, throws on the rear naked choke. So 9-year absence for Horiguchi. Seems like it was just yesterday, the way he came in there and fought at the top level in the UFC. Of course, training at ATT, lived in the mats there, lived at the camp. They named one of the dorm rooms Horiguchi Hall because the guy just actually lived there year-round before he got married and moved out and bought himself a house. But now back in the UFC. And if the fight wasn't exciting enough, having him back, the promo certainly was. When he got on the mic after the fight, doesn't mix words, doesn't, say, oh, I want to fight some guys here and get myself in the rankings. Calls out the champ, Pantoja, who, in case you didn't know, is a teammate of his. He says, hey, I love this guy, but it's a business. Let's fight for the title. Now, of course, Pantoja is going to be fighting in a couple weeks, defending that title. But he's like, if he defends the title, let's go. I want to fight him. I mean, that division, there's a lot up in the air. No reason he can't be in the mix right away. But calling out your teammate right away, trying to take his shine, trying to take his belt, interesting. But I kind of love it. And you got to be excited that Horiguchi is back at flyweight in the UFC. Now, all those picks I got out on social media, as I said. One that I didn't get out in time that I'm upset about because of the price that it was at was a prelim fight at flyweight, that same division. Number 7, Alex Perez versus number 8, Asu Almabayev. Now, this one, I was surprised that Perez was still in the top 10 here. He had lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Almabayev had gone 5-1 in the UFC. So clearly, to me, this was an easy pick for who was going to win the fight. Almabayev minus 200 was the money line, so it's still not the juiciest line. They thought it was going to go all the way, the books did. They were shading it that way. I took a calculated risk because I said Almabayev is a guy who has a lot of wins by submission. Half of Perez's losses are by submission. So I thought Almabayev by submission at plus 450 was a nice bet. I'm sorry I did not get that out to the fans because it pays off. Almabayev gets the third round standing guillotine choke 22 seconds in. It's crazy because if you're watching the fight and you're watching the live lines, at one point in the second round, Perez is actually like a minus 300 favorite. He was doing a good job in the beginning of that fight. Was mixing in some good striking, get some takedowns, so it looked like he was in control according to the books for sure. We never know with the judges until we get to the end, until we get open scoring, of course. But he was a favorite, a 3-1 favorite on the live line during the second round. But then right away in that third round, as Perez goes to get the takedown, his opponent, Almabayev, jumps on him, literally jumps into a standing guillotine, locks it in, and gets him to tap pretty much right into the round. So even though Perez was ahead, even though he was the leader in the clubhouse there, as they say, Almabayev comes through in the third round with that slick, jumping, standing guillotine to get the submission victory. It would have been a sweet hit at plus 450. I apologize, I did not get that to the fans. So that was a great card from the UFC Fight Night Qatar. There was also some other great performances throughout the prelims that were mixed in. Probably one of the best fight nights that we have seen from the UFC this year. We've had some great, of course, numbered events, some great pay-per-view cards, but that was probably one of the better fight nights, both in name and stacked up lineup and the way the action played out. But there was also a stacked card of boxing that we have to get to now. All right, also in the Middle East, you got a card in boxing on Saturday. Ring 4 Night of Champions on DAZN pay-per-view. And this one went a lot later because, of course, it's boxing. They drag it out, but they also had 4 title fights on the main card. So things went a little deeper, and you had some great fights throughout it, headlined by the WBC, WBA light heavyweight titles being on the line between David Benavidez and Anthony Yarde. Yarde, the 34-year-old from England, was 27-3 for his career, 24 KO, TKO victories. Benavidez, the Mexican monster, 28 years old from the U.S., 30-0, unbeaten, 24 by KO, TKO. We liked Benavidez, and it was hard not to. I mean, the guy was a minus 1,200 favorite. So obviously, he was the more dangerous fighter. He was the better fighter. They had him ahead by a mile. So couldn't bet that on money line. So I threw out there on social medias, bet Benavidez around 7 through 12. Because I liked him by KO, TKO, minus 165. I thought he was going to get the finish. But if you bet which rounds, got a little grouping there of what rounds he was going to get the finish in, that bumped it up to plus 155. So instead of 165 minus money, you got plus 155. And that's what pays off because he finishes him in the 7th round. 7th round TKO, 1 minute and 59 seconds into the round. I mean, Benavidez ran this one from the start. Wasn't in trouble. Wasn't ever really challenged in this one. Didn't beat him down as early as he could. Was kind of finding his way, finding his timing. Really picked it up after a couple rounds and made it more of a domination after that point. But it was just one thing after another. I mean, at one point, even looked like he was watching Aspen Ladd's fight in the BKFC a couple weeks ago because gets the one hand over the top, kind of the half clinch, and just pounding him with the offhand. Something you don't usually see in boxing. Usually the guys get one hand in the clinch and right away go to 2. You don't often see them using kind of the half clinch, tie plum kind of situation in boxing. And the ref let it go, and he just pummeled him with the offhand. Then later on, you get to the 7th round, just still throwing some nasty punches, and ends up dropping him in the 7th round. Gets back up, Yarde does, keeps continuing to fight, but then gets backed up against the ropes. And again, Benavidez just unloading on him, just extended combinations with Yarde having no answer, to the point that even though he was still on the feet, the ref stepped in and stopped the fight there. Now, of course, I came out vehemently against the Parker Wardley stoppage where Parker never went down. He was on the feet, and they gave it to Wardley. I'm not the same here because Benavidez was dominating him throughout, did drop him, and was landing every huge punch he was throwing, one after another after another. Yarde has no way of getting out of there. He's just going to take a beating until they stop it. So the ref saves him there in the 7th round and gets the TKO victory for David Benavidez. Now, apparently Benavidez is done at this division for now. He said he's going to move up to cruiserweight and challenge Zurdo Ramirez for his titles at Cinco de Mayo weekend. So big Mexican fight there. 2 different Mexican fighters with very different styles. Ramirez more of the traditional Mexican volume punching, overwhelming you. Benavidez more power and finishing. So we'll see how that one goes. It's going to be a very exciting fight, but hopefully this is not the last we see of David Benavidez at this weight class with those titles, but we'll see what is next for him if he wins on Cinco de Mayo weekend as well. You also had WBO welterweight title between Devin Haney and Brian Norman Jr. Norman Jr., the 24-year-old from Georgia, was holding the WBO welterweight championship and putting it up against Haney, the 28-year-old from California, who was a WBC super lightweight champ. Moving up here, 32-0-1 with 15 KOs, but it's going to be all about style. Norman, a power puncher, a guy who gets finishes. He had 22 KOs in his 28 wins. Haney, a guy who gets a lot of decisions, especially lately. Had gotten to judges in the last 10 fights. So it was all about who controlled the pace, who controlled things. It was pretty much an even fight, which I was surprised about odds-wise, minus 112. So I went with Haney. Obviously, the much more seasoned fighter as far as the contenders he has fought. Norman Jr. didn't have the same resume of fighters, and I thought that Haney would frustrate him, and he did. He gets the win by unanimous decision. 117, 111, 116, 112, and 114, 113. He was in control for most of this fight. Outboxed him like he likes to do. Jab throughout the fight, hit him from the outside, frustrating him, not letting him get those power punches off on Haney. And then in the second, he even dropped him. He dropped Norman Jr. with a big shot in the second, then stares him down before he gets back up and lets him off the mat. So just asserting domination from the start. And some people thought he could have gotten the finish if he really wanted to. You know, kind of coast a little bit. Some of the later rounds there, letting him regain himself back, his form. And then, of course, the last few rounds just finishes him off. Not actually finishing him off, but just dominating again. The main rounds, the 9, 10, 11, 12, to make sure he got the win. So it was a typical David Haney fight besides the knockdown where he's going to frustrate you. He's going to outpoint you. And every now and then he'll take off a couple rounds and let himself regain his breath and regain, his full battery there and then finish you off at the end. And that's what he did. Another unanimous decision win. This is his first fight at 147 now. And he said he's staying there. He likes his division. He's going to stay there for a while. So we'll see what is next for him. There's a lot of options there. This right now, of course, his only loss was to Garcia. He talked about that loss and how that messed with him and how he had to kind of rehabilitate his career in some people's eyes after that. Of course, that was changed to a no contest. But Garcia is up in this weight division now. There's also other options for him, other names that are being thrown out there that could be very interesting. So we'll see what's next for Devin Haney as he is now a champion at 147. He also had a junior bantamweight title fight with Jesse Bam Rodriguez versus Fernando Martinez. Bam Rodriguez, if you haven't watched him, just cemented himself as one of the top pound-for-pound fighters. I wasn't as familiar with him as I was the top guys. But, I'm definitely going to make sure I check out his fights going forward. The dude just dominated from get-go. Martinez looked like he didn't even want to throw because he was just going to land himself in some trouble with, of course, Rodriguez. And he was just throwing big shots left and right. When Martinez finally did try to open up in the 10th, what happened? He ate a big shot that put him on the mat and ended the fight. A nasty counter left cross that put him on the mat. No chance of him getting recovered from that. Fight goes to Bam Rodriguez, and he's showing once again how bad he is at junior bantamweight. We'll see what's next for him. WBO lightweight title was won by the youngest champion right now in boxing. That is Abdullah Mason, who would fought Sam Noke. Mason at 21 years old, got the 117, 111, 115, 113 on 2 judges' scorecards, unanimous decision. Honestly, I'm surprised it got to unanimous decision because he was throwing some nasty stuff throughout the fight, but even early in the second round, he was letting huge shots on Noke. And then in the third round, he continued with it. It looked like every punch he was throwing, he was just trying to hit as hard as he could. Noke came alive in the 5th a little bit, but Mason took back control later on in the fight. And then in the 8th round, and especially the last couple of rounds, 8th, 9th, the 10th round, like I said, every punch looked like he just put those big bags in front of him and just throw as hard as you can. Kind of like, the strength and conditioning drills a lot of these boxers do. Is just like, throw the big punch, throw the hard, throw every punch like you're trying to knock the guy out. It looked like everyone, he was just throwing a punch like he was trying to knock him out, trying to hurt him, trying to do as much damage as possible. So a great job by him to really show how badass he is. He's now 20-0, and they're putting names against him like Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Davis, others in that division that hold titles. So looks like this guy has some bright future in front of him. And at 21, he has a long way to still keep fighting as a champion here at lightweight. All right, well, last week on the show, we talked about the PFL announcing the beginning of their 2026 schedule. They're going to kick it off with a big card in Dubai, February 7th, with Usman Nurmagomedov defending his belt against Alfie Davis at lightweight. Well, they've added some more details and some more fights to that card already, and it is stacking up to be a badass card. They had a great card over there in South Africa a while back. Now they're going to finish 2025 with this card with 2 titles on the line, with a heavyweight title with Nemkov and Pereira, and then, of course, Cyborg fighting for a title there as well in France to finish up the PFL Europe season. Now they are going to add another title fight to this Dubai card and another badass fight that everyone's going to be excited for as well. 3 fights we now know of on this Dubai card to start off 2026, and it's shaping up pretty well. Of course, as I said, the lightweight title fight is going to be there between Usman Nurmagomedov and Alfie Davis. Very exciting matchup. We're also going to get a title fight at welterweight between Ramazan Karamagomedov versus Shamil Musayev. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the 29-year-old from Dagestan, is 13-0, unbeaten in his MMA career. Last fought last June against Jason Jackson, where he got a decision win. He's going to be going against Musayev, the 31-year-old from Russia, who is also unbeaten, 18-0-1. Last time we saw him was in November 2024, when he beat Umalatov by TKO to win the 2024 PFL tournament. So two undefeated fighters from the same area of the world. Going to be a very interesting battle between these two. Looking forward to that title fight. And then we're also going to get a non-title fight, which everyone's going to be excited about because it's going to have one of the biggest faces in the PFL, one of people's most exciting fighters to talk about right now, especially in the women's division, in Dakota Ditcheva, making her return for the PFL against Denise Kielholtz. Now, of course, Ditcheva is unbeaten, 15-0. Last time we saw her was a decision win over Sumiko Inaba in July. Unfortunately, she broke her hand in that fight, which was probably one of the only reasons that it went to a decision and it wasn't a finish like we've seen so many times in her career. But now she is healed up and coming back. Now she's fighting Kielholtz, who's 8-5 in her MMA career, and we haven't seen since November 2023. Last time she fought was back in Bellator against Inaba in a fight that went to decision. So it's been a long time that we haven't seen her fight, but she's going to be fighting Ditcheva right now and trying to rain on her parade, trying to stop her hype and slow the train down and maybe rebuild her career here in MMA. We'll see if she's able to do that. No one else has so far against Dakota Ditcheva, but of course, we're going to be seeing her coming off injury. Who knows what that might change, but I'm still rolling with, of course, Dangerous Ditcheva on that one when we get to that in February. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me as I talk combat sports once again. We're going to have a big show for you next week. Of course, as I said, no action this week as far as fights going on, but lots going on next week. We're going to preview UFC 323 on December 6th in Las Vegas. Absolutely stacked final pay-per-view for the UFC on ESPN. It's going to have Dvalishvili versus Jan for the bantamweight title. That's going to be a rematch between those two. It's going to have a fight between Pantoja and Van for the flyweight title. The previously mentioned Pantoja was called out by his teammate after Horiguchi made his return to the UFC. It's going to have Brandon Moreno on the fight card. Final fight possibly for Henry Cejudo. Jan Blachowicz is going to be on the card. It is a stacked card for the final pay-per-view of the UFC 2025 calendar. We'll also preview BKFC 85 in Hollywood, Florida on December 5th, the day before that, which has another stacked lineup as well. You have Trout versus Palomino, a rematch for those guys, this time at lightweight. See who moves on in that lightweight title tournament. You're also going to have Justin Ibarola versus Ryan Reber for the bantamweight title on that card, as well as plenty of other names you know like H.G. Davis and Leonardo Perdomo. And there's also a PBC pay-per-view on Prime in San Antonio on December 6th. We'll take a look at. It's going to be headlined by Lamont Roach Jr. against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Roach making his return after that controversial loss to Tank Davis. So we'll get on all that next week on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Make sure you keep up with us on social media. Fighting Lines on X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok is at Fighting Lines Pod. And wherever you're checking out the show, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can to help other people find the show and get involved and be part of all this action here on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Catch you next week.